Oh, we're discussing the commission into allegations of state capture and the latest testimony to come from there by Dr. Sydney Mufamadi regarding the State Security Agency. And to discuss this further, Wayne Duvenage, the Chief Executive Officer of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, OUTA, joins us. So let's hope that connection is better this time around. Wayne, I was asking you about the instability that has been reported about within the State Security Agency. If you could just, elucidate us with your views on that, and also how you would describe the country's intelligence at this point and to date, as well as political interference.
Yes, so as I was saying, we're not surprised to hear what happened and what Dr. Mufamadi was expressing yesterday at the Zondo Commission. When in 2009, when Jacob Zuma merged the two entities, the foreign one being the South African State or Secret Service, the SASS, as well as the National Intelligence Agency, which dealt with domestic matters, into a new agency, there's the Security Agency, State Security Agency. One got a sense that, first of all, there was this abuse of the process. Parliament wasn't involved in that decision. There was no public consultation. And it enabled the executive powers to get a lot closer to start interfering with the intelligence industry and the intelligence community in South Africa, more so for the purposes of fast forwarding or supporting Jacob Zuma's interests and agenda. In the state capture matter. It's very important to have all these security services at your fingertips. There's a lot of cash that changes hands. They do so in order to ensure that the tracing of the funds for the various purchases that need to be taken or needed to take place was not traceable. And that's how the Secret Service and the agencies work. And a lot of that money went into the wrong hands. And as you were saying earlier on, so much was happening behind the scenes that we could see as society was being misused, state funds being misused and abused, and no accountability. Even the Auditor General was finding it extremely difficult to do audits and trace the money flows in the SSA.
But isn't that the very nature of intelligence, of state security, that it would be difficult to actually follow a trail?
Yeah, you can understand some of it, but you still need to, it needs to be a department that is responsible and can account for its funds. If it's doing its work above board and not in the interests of factions and personal interests, then there should be an explanation for everything. And what we found was this complete abuse of authority with the funds in that department, slash funds and spending that was not accounted for. And yes, while we need to see the proof of the cash that changed hands from the minister at the time to Jacob Zuma, one has to ask the question, why, in the first place, is a minister receiving so much cash? What is he doing with that cash? Why can't he account for that cash? Because ultimately, he's the accounting authority and need to be held responsible for what's happening there. And they go back. We go back to that common adage, connect the dots, and the picture starts to become clearer of total abuse and gross abuse of funds within this agency. I mean, when you listened to all the interference that was taking place in the various areas of the country and of the state, using funds to prop up news agencies, to undermine civil society, and other instances of gross abuse. I mean, we really need to understand these projects, the training of the VIP protection units. Why was this happening? Why were people receiving protection from the VIP unit that didn't qualify for it, like Dudu Mnyeni and Sean Abrams and Colin Main? This is really mind-boggling stuff, but as I say, we're not surprised.
So how important is it that we can actually, in your words, connect the dots to the point where we are actually able to place that money in the hands of a minister, in the hands of a former president? Or is it enough to just make these allegations and say this happened when we cannot absolutely join the dot all the way to them?
You see, I think the investigation, with all the evidence that they were able to go through, was able to satisfy themselves that the minister received the money. Whether there's proof that that money was handed over to Jacob Zuma, that seems to be missing. But then what happened to the money? And if you start to imagine they are evaluating all the evidence that they had, and this is where the so-called trail leads to, and there are no other answers, well, then they need to make some findings, but they need to provide the proof. We need to sort of understand why was nothing done when 17 million rand was missing out the safe in the complex of the State Security Agency? Why did the Hawks not follow through when there was ex-camera evidence? There's just so much that is unanswered. And when this happens in an organization like the State Security Agency, and the president is closely involved with the decisions to rearrange that agency, it really does give one a sense that there was complete abuse, and the president was part of the problem here.
So, Wayne, how does a country's intelligence agencies ensure absolute independence? Can it actually happen?
Well, yes, it should. You know, it shouldn't have the interference. As we said, Parliament was not even involved. This is why the parliamentary processes in so much of state capture were sidetracked and abused over the last decade or so. We've seen that very often, and to no lesser extent here in the State Security Agency. And I think oversight is very important. The Auditor General is an oversight entity. There are a number of oversight entities even within the State Security Agency, and yet they were usurped. Their powers were missing in action. They were diverted. They were sent off on a wild goose chase often when they were trying to follow up on funds. What is the State Security Agency doing, interfering in worker unions, for instance, and funding the setup of new worker unions, and dealing with the breakaways from COSATU? There was just so much happening here that if it's unaccounted for, the minister first and foremost has to answer to this. So we'd be very interested to see what Minister Mhlobo says to these allegations, and how he responds to the proof that and the facts that Sidney Mufamadi and his team have come up with.
How dangerous is this trajectory that we are going down as a country with regard to the Zondo Commission and state security related evidence being led on such a public platform? Do you believe that we could find ourselves in very murky waters here? Because now we're sitting with a situation whereby you have the Arthur Fraser, Bongani Bongo, Jabulani Maduma, all of these very senior members of the State Security Agency, their attorneys have now written to the Commission asking for information to be declassified. And one would imagine that information, for it to be classified, would be of a highly sensitive nature. And now they are asking for a lot of this to be declassified. So are we not walking a very tight rope here?
You know, it's been murky waters and tightrope walking for this country for a long time now. And this commission is doing excellent work in uncovering and exposing what has to be exposed. Obviously, the factionalism comes into play here. There are two sides to every story. Three sides, as they say, the truth then comes out eventually. And society has to make sense of all of this. But without the commission, without these exposés, without the evidence that is put forward by the evidence leaders and the individuals that come to testify, we know no better. We've seen headlines, we've seen speculation in the past, and we really had to make up our own minds as society. So we believe this is excellent work that is coming out, and there will be casualties, and there will be all sides wanting to put their input into the commission. And what we need to do as society is make sense of that. What the courts need to do, and this is very important, this information now flows into the National Prosecuting Authority's hands. The Zondo Commission has to make a report at the end as to what are the recommendations that come from the commission. And this is going to be very important for society because we need to get through this. We need to understand what happened to our country during these years, and we need to prevent it from happening again. And if this means that stuff that shouldn't be classified has to be declassified, and the truth comes out, that is excellent for society. We need to know as citizens what's been happening to this country and our money.
So you're happy for everything that is requested to be declassified to be declassified?
Well, if it falls within the ambit of declassification from a point of view that people are protected, their lives are not in danger, the state's security matters are still handled correctly, then yes, let's see what comes out of that. I think there will be court cases to argue what should be declassified and what not. I think this is where it gets very messy and complicated. And if this takes more time, then so be it. But we as society, we sit back as citizens, and we've got to get the truth, and we need to know exactly what was happening. What we're hearing from Dr. Mufamadi's input yesterday, as I said earlier on, is not surprising to us. We've seen and heard so much in the past. I mean, even as OUTA, when we interdicted the ETOL matter, we were followed. Our phones were listened to. We got all that information. We understood what was going on, and it's just not right for these state security agencies to conduct themselves in a manner that undermines the freedom of civil society, the freedom of speech, the freedom of association, and to manipulate media in the way that they did. I mean, this is just unheard of. Well, it's not unheard of. It's just quite sickening, really.
It's going to be very interesting. Thank you so much, Wayne Duvenage, the CEO of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, talking to us about Sidney Mufamadi's testimony at the Zondo Commission yesterday. And it's going to be interesting to see what eventually, if anything, gets declassified and who actually gets drawn into this. And I can't wait. It is the time now for the latest.